Yes, good evening to our listeners on Facebook and YouTube. We would have to say delayed greeting to our listeners on 91.1 FM Talk City because they are not on with us live this evening. Good evening to my brother Shabaka. Now, of course, this program keeps evolving over time, getting better and better. This evening, we are having another breakthrough where we are going to be linking up with Gael live for the first time, and hence, going forward, we are going to be streaming live on Gael, courtesy Mr. Errol Fabien. So we will be streaming on Gael this evening. And indeed, we have Mr. Fabien on with us this evening to talk about one of the biggest shows on that television channel and the collection of materials that have been purchased by Barbados during the CARIFESTA period. We're going to be talking to Errol Fabien about that. And we are going to talk about the CARIFESTA itself. Errol Fabien is going to be talking to us. Dr. Rhoda Arrindell, a linguist and educator, she's going to be talking to us as well about the significance of CARIFESTA to the Caribbean, including, of course, the Banyan fires, as I said. And African History Month is coming up. So we would be having some updates and insights from the Emancipation Support Committee's engine room from time to time. This evening we are going to have Khadija Dyer with us, telling us what's going on, what's coming up, what about that African history quiz and spoken word competition. She's going to tell us something about that this evening. That's my brother Shabaka.
Yes, brother, it's indeed a pleasure to be here again for another edition of Indaba. And I do look forward to chatting with our guests, Abeo, Errol, and of course, Dr. Rhoda. Where do we begin tonight, Doctor?
Where do we begin tonight? We have to look at the running order, and I forgot Abeo. So thanks for highlighting Abeo. Abeo, of course, is very much attached to the African History Quiz as well. So she comes with a lot of service to the Emancipation Support Committee. According to our running order here, I think we have a report from the Secretariat coming up. So Khadija should be getting ready to come onto the program to join us and tell us what's going on with the African History Quiz. Welcome to the program, Sister Khadija. Looking as beautiful as ever. And you're going to, yes, of course, yes. Fashion model in your own right, quite often. You're not just associated with the fashion shows, but you're an exemplar as well. So tell us about what's coming up. What's with the Secretariat, the latest updates we should be aware of, and what should we be expecting?
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. Hi, Shabaka, Dr. Rhoda. Abby, how are you? And little Abby going, Uncle Fabien, nice to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while. Good afternoon, Renee, everyone. So yes, we are preparing for the African History Quiz and Spoken Word competition. For the Spoken Word competition, and registration is closed because we would have taken 25 winners from the regionals, which took place in term 3 of the school calendar. So we took 25 students from the regionals and they advanced to the finals. Well, this period we call the spoken word competition, the national spoken word competition. However, for the African History Quiz that targets secondary school students, registration is open. So I know some students have been messaging us asking when we are opening registration as well as teachers. So I'm here to let you know that registration is open. We know that some students are coming back with a vengeance as well. We have some tricks in the bag that we are bringing this year. And the competition, besides giving the children that knowledge about themselves and also giving them the tools to understand who they are, who we are as a people, it also provides some networking for the students. We do have a network outside of the competition where students and teachers use that network to get further information. And for those who also have various African theme activities in their school, we do assist with that as well. So the competition is geared towards students again in secondary school from Form 1 to 5 or from ages 12 to 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we are Republic Bank through the Power to Make a Difference program will be our sponsor for this year again.
Excellent. Well, you know, the sponsors and the team have been doing a great job. The quiz and the spoken word and the other events are constantly increasing in audiences and response and feedback has been very positive. And so I don't expect anything different this year.
No, just I'm excited to see how the children navigate our little surprises. Sometimes they themselves surprise us when we think that the questions are too hard. They surprise us. I know our moderator is on tonight, Abeo. I know she'll mention it as well. Even at times she's blown away, like, you know, you'll really study this booklet, and it's not just they regurgitating the information, but they understand the information and they themselves are able to articulate and their understanding of it and explain it to their peers.
I've been part of that team behind the scenes that updates that booklet on a regular basis, or has done some updating over the last few years. Are there plans this year to update the booklet again, to add new elements?
So we are keeping our four categories, which are general knowledge, Africans in science and technology, historical African events, and renowned Africans. This year, we are paying close attention to what you call
we're looking at reparations.
Yes, looking at reparations. Yes. So, for example, like in general knowledge, we will be sharing the various countries that have received or taken back their artifacts. Also, the removal of certain statues, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but throughout the diaspora.
For our audience, those who may not be following the details of what's happening with artifacts in the post-colonial period, I think we need to say, when we talk about taking back artifacts, we're talking about artifacts that were looted during the colonial period and found their way into public collections and museums in the metropoles, and now the former those in the colonies, on the former colonies, want to have their riches, their artifacts, their prized possessions that were stolen returned. And they're increasing.
And not just one, they need to return. They need their belongings in their country, because that is part of their history, that's part of their culture.
That's right.
Yeah, that's quite correct, but it's...
We've had some discussion on those debates right here on Indaba surrounding these issues over the last year or so. And we're going to continue to follow those issues as when they find themselves at the most dramatic inflection points. but certainly, we know that behind the scenes things are ongoing. And Dr.
Yes.
Fergus, of course, has led those
Okay,
conversations.
I had a little disruption there. I had a
That's all
little
right.
accident there. I was going to say that yes, Shabaka is quite correct. We have to look at the colonial imperial context, but also it's not just about the treasure, but also about restitution in general. For example, a lot of the body parts that were taken away for experimentation and other macabre activities. Those are very much at the center of the African reparation movement from the continent. Restitution is central to reparations from a continental perspective. Besides the wealth, a lot of these body parts that have been taken away. Of course, the Caribbean has an element of that as well. But we are looking mainly at the continent. But as Khadija said, of course, the Caribbean experience and other parts of the diaspora, of course, will be touched as well. Because we need
Yeah,
to give them that idea all the time that Africa is a global concept, right? It's a
indeed.
global family that we are talking about.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just not just giving them the idea. I mean, it's sharing the fact of the global concept. And just to double down on that, in my recent research, I discovered that the remains of some of our revolutionary emancipationists from the Eastern Caribbean are in museums in the UK, and researchers know where they are. And so it means that some of the great freedom fighters of the region, we are yet to go and claim their remains and return them home for proper burial. So this is something that we should seriously think about. Also, I discovered that the famous, some of the artifacts belonging to the great Saint Vincent General Chatouillet, the leader of the Garifuna people, are also in some provincial museum in the UK, and those are things that could be returned to the Caribbean and find a home in some kind of sacred memorial to the great man. And so, yeah, these are not faraway concepts. And of course, Dr. Fergus has touched on the one that I think really gets under everybody's skin, the idea that this was not just about treasure, but about body parts. And that today, even today, there are, auctions of the heads of people of different parts of the colonial world being sold and traded in Europe. Frightening stuff.
Yeah.
Indeed,
So
indeed.
all you have touched on all some of the topics that we'll be sharing with the students.
Right. So
Awesome.
thank you very much, Khadija. And we will be seeing you again on a regular basis, I'm sure, to give
Yes, along
us
with some
updates.
students
You
and
or
teachers to give us some updates.
yes, indeed, indeed. But I want to remind viewers that they can send their questions and feedback to us. We ask if you are using WhatsApp to do so, that you should, in fact, send us a voice message rather than call, because you wouldn't get through if you call. So send us a voice message. Try to keep it down to 90 seconds. I think you can adequately make a fair comment within 90 seconds. Send it to us and we will play it on the program. The numbers to use are at the bottom of the screen. You would see the ticker moving across the screen. That would be there continuously. So if you miss it in passing, just wait. It will come your way again. Take it down and you can send us a message. Yes, Shabaka.
Yeah, first of all, let me just greet Mother Irene. We haven't seen her in a while. One of our loyal listeners and a great stalwart of the Emancipation Support Committee. So, Mother Irene, greetings to you and your family. Thanks for joining us here tonight on Indaba. Okay, so let's get to our main subject for tonight, Doctor. Let's talk about CARIFESTA. And
Indeed.
and as we enter into this discussion, one of the questions I'm going to pose to our guest tonight is the question of the position of the arts in our society, in our imagination. You know, it seems to me that since the advent of smartphones, you know, somewhere around that period in the 2000s, things like CARIFESTA, you know, anything related to the arts in general has seemed to have gone into some kind of decline in terms of respectability, in terms of, in many respects, in terms of audience turnout, in terms of the importance that we give it, in terms of the place it occupies in our imagination. And I want our guests tonight to speak to this issue, to let me know, or to let our audience know if this is indeed the case, and if so, is it a situation that is reversible? So we're looking forward. So here we are.
So we want to welcome our guests this evening. Let us tell you a little bit about each one of them. Of course, we are discussing, as we said, the significance of CARIFESTA and the Banyan files to Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. CARIFESTA has just been concluded, and the theme was Caribbean Roots Global Excellence. So we are hoping to get some explanation of the Banyan files, which was purchased by Barbados, I understand. So we're going to talk about that. Why is it that the Barbadian government and not the Trinidad and Tobago government would have taken possession of it? Of course, we're glad that the Caribbean government has done it rather than a foreign government or foreign university. So we have Abeo Jackson, no stranger to Indaba. She's a multidisciplinary artist right here from Trinidad and Tobago. She's interested and engaged in ongoing creative diasporic Jamet discourse, she calls it. If you're Trinidadian, no need to explain that. Jamet discourse, while further exploring the underpinnings of art as advocacy. She is a past Coco Dance Festival Maverick Award winner, as well as a past Trinidad and Tobago National Youth Award recipient in the sphere of culture. She recently won the Best Supporting Actress Award at the First Contact Film Festival in New Jersey. She has a BA in Theater and Dance from Dickinson College, Pennsylvania, and a Master of Arts in Acting for Screen from the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama in London. So you can imagine that when she offers her services to the African History Quiz, you are talking about quality, you're talking about talent, and you're talking about an intellectual, particularly within the field of creative arts and dance and so on. Errol Fabien is perhaps, just to take a play on his name, a fabled name in theater, in cinema, in television, in the arts, on stage in Trinidad and Tobago. He's an actor, a presenter, a writer, a producer, a comedian as well, one of the top-rated comedians, and a director for stage, radio, and television. In February 2004, he teamed up with Banyan Limited and was part of the team of Trinidad's first community television station, Gael, which, subject to correction, you will correct me if I'm wrong, Gael, the channel, which was founded by Bruce Paddington. I know Bruce as a lecturer at UWI, and he was involved in the production of a lot of documentaries and so on. Today, Errol is the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of this innovative television initiative. And we have Dr. Rhoda Arrindell, no stranger to Indaba. She's a linguist, educator, author, and activist from 2010 to 12. She served as St. Martin's first Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, and Youth Affairs in the UP/DP coalition government. Since leaving office, she has served as an independent education consultant while teaching in higher education. She published a groundbreaking book, Language, Culture, and Identity in St. Martin, in 2014, and has just completed the manuscript for her second book, How to Get a World-Class Education from St. Martin. She's also a founder and president of the One St. Martin Association and has committed her life to pursuing reparatory justice for the people of St. Martin, for the Caribbean, for the diaspora. So welcome all, and let's dive into the program. I don't know if you want to address the question posed by my colleague first, but I wanted to throw something into the mix as well. Now, as a historian, I like to connect with the past, and I was wondering what were the direct antecedents for CARIFESTA. I use an expression here, you're all artists, you'll understand what it means. How much was there a Sankofa in the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, so far as CARIFESTA is concerned? Because the Harlem Renaissance, as you would know, was an outpouring of African arts, literature, music, and so on. And some of the greats, I can call two names there, readily come to mind. Langston Hughes, who I quoted in my second book there, very revolutionary poet, and Duke Ellington, in terms of music and so on. And so that, going back to the 20s, you know, how much of a spiritual experience, a cultural, in a sense, connection does CARIFESTA make with that period and that outpouring of African diaspora creativity? And more immediate, in terms of the Writers and Artists Convention of the 60s and early 70s, just before CARIFESTA was launched, you know, and those movements, of course, straddling the civil rights movement, Black Power advocacy, in which there was a sense of a search for a Caribbean personality, you know, and Black Stallion, I believe it was, who iconized that in his Calypso, Caribbean Man. I see an equivalent there, and also see an equivalent in the expression African personality. There was this search for meaning, cultural meaning, after independence, like it's a search for true freedom of expression. And we have Festac. How do we connect CARIFESTA to Festac, which followed? Was CARIFESTA the experience and the antecedent of Festac? Because we know a lot of Caribbean people were involved in among the thousands of people present there. And immortalizing by Sparrow, Dudu Yemi and Natasha, you know. So a lot of thought there, and we want to let you address that. I don't know who wants to go first, but from what Shabaka said, what I said, you can pick up any one of them, you know, linking those expressions along the road of diaspora creativity and motherland as well. Perhaps, Shabaka, you should rephrase your question, since they were not on screen at the time. So go ahead, and they can pick up anywhere.
Yes. So my question, ladies and gentlemen, brothers, sisters, and brother, has to do with this perception that the importance of the arts, and by extension, this significant festival of the arts, seems to be diminishing in the last few decades. You know, if you were to Google this question, I mean, there would be no end to the amount of articles written to, you know, either sort of acknowledging that there's something wrong or suggesting that this may not necessarily be the case. But there's definitely widespread perception that the arts are in some kind of decline, if not in crisis. And so I guess we could start by looking at, you know, you guys could start by discussing this concept. from the perspective of CARIFESTA? Perhaps Dr. Rhoda, you may want to begin the conversation. You know, we say ladies first.
I was just gonna say I let the gentleman, but anyway, I thought I got away with it. First of all,
By the way, Abeo, if you can put on your camera, we'll appreciate it. We're not seeing you.
let me just
Yes, go ahead, Doctor.
The organizers and you guys for this opportunity. You know, I had the good privilege and fortune to attend CARIFESTA this year, and I too have a similar program that I co-host with my colleague in St. Martin called Culture Time. And the question that Shabaka just posed was one of the things that we have been, you know, talking about. And so when I got to the CARIFESTA village, I should say, right at the beginning, and I was like, well, probably not. And why do I say this? Is it in decline? Are the arts in decline? First of all, it was just an awesome experience, right? To be in a space where the family is together again. You see all the beauty of us as a people and trying to deal with serious and lighter issues through our arts. And I thought, wow, you know, for whatever reasons, it's taken a while for us to get back to this festival. But if only we would continue the momentum every 2 years, I don't see it diminishing. What I think I saw, and this is a conversation I had with a few of the artists, was what role do the artists think that their responsibility is in the movements, like the things that we all subscribe to, the things that we are pushing forward in our day-to-day work, and where do the arts fit in? And I get the impression that some, not all, some of the artists think like, you know, well, I have to move forward, I have to get mine. And so a lot of the artists are doing their part, they are connecting, but more in isolation than in terms of a common goal or a common movement. And I'm saying in their individual arts, but also as individual artists. So the designers are doing their thing, and then the photographers are doing their thing, and then the dancers, but then you get the opportunity to reconnect during CARIFESTA, and then you realize that people are inspired. I had artists from St. Martin who had never been exposed to a CARIFESTA, for example, and were amazed that they also have access to this platform.
Yeah,
because they... Yeah, sorry?
Just before we continue, in 2019, Dr. Susan Burke made the observation that, you know, the ideas aspect of the CARIFESTA, that's the symposia that used to be at the center of the festival. She said, she made the observation that it was a tradition that had waned. That's using her term. It had become marginalized in the festival. And just to put this into perspective for someone who's just coming into this conversation, when I was a child, I remember going to see Leroy Clark debate Peter Minshall, two of our great artists and great thinkers, sit across the room from each other and debate the history and relevance of Carnival. And it was one of the most inspiring events, and the room was packed to capacity, and if you didn't come early, you had to stand outside and see what you could hear. And so ideas was central you know, in the CARIFESTA program. What was your experience this year?
Well, one of the things, and I'm not sure if it was done intentionally and how to compare it to previous years, but one of the things was that there's so many events and activities, like you really had to like look at the menu and try to figure out where you would be and, you know, how you get around the island. So that was kind of, sort of like a challenge. But what I got, because I was on a symposium with dealing with decolonization, and just before us was the symposium on reparations. And so it was well attended, the people were engaged, but there were so many of those happening throughout the different venues that I'm not sure how many people attended what. I only try to speak to the people that I recognize, that I knew that attended now, but just about every event that I attended, and that connection to the diaspora that I thought was so important was that there were so many African groups that were also part of the conversation this year, like had traveled from the African continent and had also engaged in some of their production Caribbean artists. So there was a mixing in some of the performances that were African. And so just speaking up, and I'm going to stop here, right? Just to give everybody else an opportunity.
I have one more question for you before you stop, though. We're gonna move on to the other question.
Right?
I have one question for you.
Yeah, but to speak to the issue of this notion of repatriation of artifacts, etc. So one of the theatrical performances that I attended had to do with the return of bones, with regards to this conversation taking place in places like Zimbabwe and stuff. And one of the cardinal questions that I, as a university scholar, had never thought about seriously in my drive for repatriation of artifacts, etc., had to do with cultural context. And what the artist was saying, the director of the play was saying, it's been 4 years since the conversation with the UK has been ongoing with regards to the return of artifacts, not because for lack of will, but what happens to them when they return. So in their culture, you cannot bury people without their heads, for example. They were talking about skulls. And if you return them and you put them in a museum somewhere, to the people whose skulls they belong, that it would be for them still blasphemy, because they needed the skulls of their ancestor to be buried to complete the process of burial. Wow. And it's something that I had not thought about. And I thought that was a deep conversation for us to have when we speak of repatriation and reparations, etc. Like, what do we do with these artifacts when they come back? And why do we store them in museums? For whose benefit do we do that? And why is that relevant? Is that something that's culturally relevant to us, or are we also assuming some of the values of the colonizer when we put these things in?
Yes. So these are all brilliant questions, Doctor. So I have last question for you before we move on to our other guests. I mean, you spoke about decolonization. You're coming from St. Martin. St. Martin right now is in the midst of a real challenging question there around the question of hair, decolonizing the view of African hair. And how and the discrimination being meted out to children going to school with natural hair. Can you just say something about that before we go to our other guests?
Right. It's an ongoing conversation. When I served as minister, it was a conversation that I engaged in directly, and at a point where I asked the parent of the child to take me to court, right? Take the minister to court, because there's some of these things that we hide behind the law or the principle. But what St. Martin also has that a lot of the other non-colonized countries don't have, we have school boards that sort of semi-autonomous outside of government, and they tend to be bigger than life sometimes, and they're the ones with these laws and regulations. And right now the current minister is trying to address that, because the minister is for the decolonization of the hair policies, but the school boards, the ones with the power, the authority over the education space, are the ones that are challenging the minister. So it's going to be an ongoing conversation, but I believe that in the end, the minister will prevail because she has the backing of the public.
Yeah, Dr. Rhoda, Dr. Fergus and I have some experience with this question here in Trinidad and Tobago, having engaged in the struggle for some time. From the perspective of the Caribbean Freedom Project, also the Emancipation Support Committee. So we want to offer our services to you. I'm going to speak on his behalf. If there's any way that we can support the efforts to liberate African hair in St. Martin, please let us know. We'll be in touch with you after the show on that subject. Let me bring in Brother Errol and Sister Abeo now into the conversation. So, picking up on some of the themes, Errol and Abeo, that Dr. Rhoda just engaged, where would you guys like to start?
Greetings, everybody. Are you all hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you, Abeo.
Yes, we're hearing you.
Apologies for not being on camera tonight. It is unavoidable, unfortunately. I also was at CARIFESTA this year in a new capacity. I've been taking part in CARIFESTA ever since I was a tiny tot. When I started dancing with Laser Fa Dance Company, the couple of times CARIFESTA would have been in Trinidad and Tobago, I was one of the little ones who would have been in the opening. I eventually made the trek to Guyana one year, but performer, whether it was I was actor or dancer. This year I participated at CARIFESTA in the capacity of scholar. I was part of the symposia, presenting on my ongoing PhD work, which is dealing with Jamets, millennial Jamets in particular, which is a reimagination of Tony Hall, may he walk in power, his original Jamet consciousness. Also building out from Dr. Burke's Jamatizen, Leah Gordon, who have worked within the realm of Jamet as an articulation of, I guess you can call it feminist, I would say womanist, particularly Black womanist articulations in our Caribbean space. So I had the privilege of being accepted to present snippets of two of my original pieces. One called Jamet Yard and another one called Millennial Jamet WTF 40. What I would say in response to you, Shabaka, I was at CARIFESTA and I felt the energy of the space. Sometimes we talk about the arts being in a place of flux and being worried about how much influence it still has on our space, but being at CARIFESTA this year underlined for me just how safe in a lot of ways the arts for the artist in particular is. Now, we could definitely talk about whether the arts for the wider space is truly, I want to say it's underestimated. CARIFESTA has always been a celebration of our intangible heritage, intangibles, things that existing within a current ongoing post-colonial plantation, very complicated, creolized, capitalist society would like to dismiss in a lot of ways, because those systems of power understand why the arts can be so dangerous. The art is dangerous because it is a direct challenge to status quo. And I sat there, I remember I sat in the Grand Market one day and I was looking at various performances that were ongoing in the Grand Market. Three generations, because I went with my mother and my baby. So it's three of us sitting there, three generations, already influenced by this amazing, powerful space. And I'm looking at the articulations, particularly of the dancers. And a couple things struck me where I'm looking at the articulations of the dancers coming from different spaces, different courts that we were taken to against our will, dehumanized, etc. And realizing that we're doing the same thing. The lavway might be different, the chant might be different, but your body's articulation in response to the drum is the very same. It's the same. The accent might be a little bit different, but it's the same. We still speak in the same language. And in a lot of ways, the danger of the arts to status quo is that if we as a Caribbean truly understood why CARIFESTA originally came into existence back in 1972, post-independence of very many of our Caribbean spaces, to celebrate and to hold on to and to find our collective sameness, to underline our collective power, to underline that collective cultural confidence, to borrow from Mia Motley. And I think her doubling down on the idea of cultural confidence is a big reason why Barbados, and maybe not Trinidad and Tobago, eventually purchased the Banyan archives. Because Barbados, I'm not saying that Mia Motley is perfect. I'm probably not completely familiar with her politics, partially so. But one thing that I have become very, very convinced observing her is that her understanding of the power of Caribbean collective, our Caribbean cultural confidence, our intangible heritage as a tool for wide systemic ideological geopolitical disruption she's miles ahead of many of our male dominated governments. And I say that without apology, because remember, my work is Jamet Technologies.
Jamet Technologies. Okay, so Abeo, let me just acknowledge the role of Black Power in this whole conversation of culture. and CARIFESTA coming around 1972.
Absolutely.
That is, but I need to ask you for the purpose of our listeners before we go to Brother Errol, and we're not bringing him in last because he's the least. We're bringing we're coming to you now. I just, our listeners are going to want to know, some people would just associate the word jamet with a particular kind of behavior. A woman who lives down the road, so to speak, and who occupies the corners in the late evening time, and whom could give you a dread tongue lashing if you make eye contact in the wrong way. And so I would like you to take the opportunity to explain to our listeners how you use this term, how you've appropriated this term, to address certain kinds of issues and so on. And then last but not least, you also mentioned the move from feminism to womanism. And you're going to have to educate our listeners on that as well. Otherwise, they're going to be stopping me in the streets tomorrow and saying, but you had Abeo, she introduced these concepts and you didn't clarify. So please clarify those two concepts first, and then let's bring Brother Errol into the conversation. And I'm sure he has some expertise on geometry as well. So we're gonna get him on his subject.
Geometry.
Unfortunately, have disruption that I would have given for my presentation, and I'll just share a little bit with you to contextualize what Jamet is. Before I read it, Jamet originally had to do with a class of people. Jamet wasn't originally just about the woman, the feminine, particularly the Black urban post-colonial body. It was originally an entire class of people, and the word came from diamet, meaning below the line, right? So meaning the lowest of the classes, right? So it was had to do with an entire class of people, which is why we refer to the Jamet Carnival, which is different from the, if you want to call it, the other upper class spectacle. Yes.
Yeah,
so
you, in a sense, synonymous with the working class.
Right. Good. So you usually have two carnivals operating in a space at the same time, and sometimes they are diametrically opposed to each other, but sometimes we forget that. Jamet Carnival is out of which you find the characters, the baby doll, the Dame Lorraine, the Boisman, calendar, aka stick fight, is a major part of that space. It is only it's after that the term Jamet specifically was used to refer to the prostitute, the hot girl, the woman cast aside, the problem woman, so to speak, right? But what I would say is, as I close, I'll just read my closing. As we close, I want to remind us that this work is not nostalgia, it is strategy. Jamet Technologies is an argument for the Jamet as more than spectacle, as more than metaphor. She is praxis, she is archive, she's an algorithm for survival, coded in body, sound, and story. Yeah. I refer to my work here in staging excerpts from Millennial Jamet, WTF 40, and Out of the Jamet Yard. We have seen how performance can operate both as invocation and documentation. How a waistline, a cuss word, a lavway, or a hashtag can hold history, critique power, and imagine new futures.
Right. So we're talking about, I think, because I don't want to cut you off, but we want to get to Errol as quickly as possible. But I want to say that you're talking there about a working class consciousness, which is something we have to revisit. Our society is one where now everybody wants to sort of identify as something above their status. They want to be, in with a particular kind of crowd and a particular kind of fashion, and to drive something they may not be able to afford. There's a tendency in our society to lose, we've lost that working class consciousness where we celebrate, according to Leroy Clark back at his CARIFESTA presentation, the grassroots. And so I think that I could see the importance of what you're saying there. Now, Abeo, just quickly, the difference between the feminist and the womanist.
Feminist and womanist. Now, again, the point of Jamet is that ability, as Tony Hall says, to know when to disrupt, to know when. It's one of the things where the Jamet of the now almost hides in plain sight. Understand? She is your everyday woman, but she's not only just your everyday woman that you would expect to be in the urban spaces. She's your everyday woman that knows how to hide in plain sight and navigate certain spaces in a way that is disruptive, um, that is disruptive and reparative, right? And I use the word womanist because feminist is a word that has been co-opted, particularly by the academy, particularly by the white and white adjacent academy, and is riddled with all kinds of problematic. Whereas when you use the word womanist, it is much more rooted in the black experience. It is much more rooted in the diasporic experience.
Okay, so just because your audio is so low, just the benefit of our audience on 91.1 and other places, Sister Abeo is saying that the word feminist has found its way into popular discourse in particular ways that that womanists can critique and of course we won't be able to go into all those details on tonight's program, but we're going to have to invite Abeo back to go into more details. That's a brilliant and interesting conversation. Brother Errol, let's bring you into the conversation here. It's already 8:49. We're going to go overtime. We're going to have Indaba overtime tonight. But, did you attend CARIFESTA as well in Barbados?
No, I did not attend CARIFESTA. I didn't know CARIFESTA was on. And that is something, it's very unusual for me because I'm very much on the ground with respect to artists in different ways. The station, Gael, is very much in touch with the artists at all times. In fact, I knew CARIFESTA was on the day before it started when Christopher and Bruce received their induction into the CBU Hall of Fame. And he called me to tell me, and he said, tomorrow is CARIFESTA. And then a couple of artists in Trinidad called me to find out, you get called. I ain't get called. You know who getting called? Who we sending? We don't know who they're sending. And that is the Jamet level, I'll have to say, of arts in not only Trinidad and Tobago, because there are artists who go to CARIFESTA so they get to eat their food, because they live by art. And yes, there's the symposia and so on going on, but there are people who go to CARIFESTA and artists who go to CARIFESTA for the show. They're in business with the discourse, they're in business with the intellectual thing. They want to see, they want to hear, they want to dance, they want to move, they want to experience something that makes them know that they are Caribbean people. But the whole Jamet aspect of the thing is very, very real, because there are people who want to disrupt, they want to be there, and they ain't get a call, and it is as though it is exclusive circles, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, it's circles, the who know your ism of art that is starting to pervade. And I suspect that has something to do with the waning that Dr. Burke was talking about.
Interesting insights, Errol. Now, in terms of the purchase of the Banyan files, because we know a lot of our listenership tonight would come seeking more information on that. This was something that we would have woken up to, that would have caused all of us some degree of consternation. Some people couldn't quite understand why they were concerned. They didn't quite know what was in those files and so on, but they just had a feeling that something strange had happened there, that something might have been out of sync, and it's something that should not have happened would have happened. And so clarify for us, is this something that did you see this as a negative thing? Should they look at it through that lens?
No, absolutely not. It is a very good thing. It's a very positive thing that has happened. The Banyan Archive, a 40-year-old rich archive, spans the Caribbean very much. And Christopher Laird, Tony Hall, and Bruce Paddington were the owners of Banyan Limited, who created the archive. Many, many people worked for Banyan over those 40 years, in and out, in and out. But those guys owned Banyan Limited. And they were trying for years, because that archive started on reel-to-reel video, evolved onto 3/4-inch magnetic tapes, evolved onto a 1/2-inch magnetic tape, then evolved onto what they call a mini DV tape, before it ended up being files. So the archive itself is a walk or a sankofa through the evolution of video. Okay, so it needed to be cataloged and digitized so that it is in the current format, which are files. And they tried the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago to get an institution or an organization or a person to pay for it, because a very, very meticulous thing to be done. And a university in Toronto, I think it was, are the people who eventually funded this exercise so that the archive became digitized, and there's a catalog. You could go online and search and cross-reference stuff. It's there. What has happened since that is that they continue to try to get the archive into the hands of the public or the eyes of the public. But there was a requirement for them to be paid for their work. And the National Gas Company at one point said, we're going to pay for it. And so we thought that that was going to happen. And Mark Loquan, may he rest in peace, died before the process could have come through. But there wasn't a sense that it was going to happen at any rate. People at UWI wanted it. NALIS people, the people in those places wanted it. National Archive wanted, but the person to sign the check wasn't there.
Didn't materialize. Dr. Fergus, let me bring you into the conversation here. I'm sure you have a question for Brother Errol.
Yeah, well, as usual, I'm interested in symbolisms and so on as well, in addition to the realities of the day. So I want to tie in the actual files and the whereabouts of the files now with the meaning of the term Banyan. Banyan, a local term, I believe. Root, we talk about roots. So my interest is in, the original concept of this thing and how it would have evolved to capture whatever was within that symbolism, of roots, deeply embedded roots even above the ground and so on, as a banyan tree. So as an artist, perhaps you can articulate that for us, this concept in itself that would capture the sort of philosophy behind the work that was ongoing for those 40 years, right? And also specifically with the fact that now I believe the Barbados would have purchased the collection, and since that purchase, as usually happens, would there have been, a sort of sudden realization within Trinidad that we have lost something? And people now come in to express their misfortune that, or even accuse you for selling out and so on. What was the reaction after the news that Barbados would have purchased the collection?
There was widespread discontent and anger and all kinds of things, negative feelings towards it. But it was a great thing, a wonderful thing that has happened, because one of the conditions of sale was that it be made available to Caribbean people wherever they are. And that is something that Mia Motley bought into. And she expressed that when she announced that it has been bought by Barbados and they are going to make it available to Caribbean people. Now, when we say it was bought by them, it means the right to manage it was bought by them. Because remember, the university who paid for it to be digitized, they have it on a platform. But universities subscribe to that and they have access to that. Not individuals, not Caribbean people, wherever they are. But it is the intention stated by Mia Motley that that is what is going to happen to the archive. Currently, people can see much of that archive on Gaia Caribbean because Gaia has access to that archive. We've always had, because Banyan was the majority shareholder in this station when we set it up. Today, they are no longer shareholders in the station, and it is an agreement that Christopher and I have that Gael will continue to have access to that archive. So people can see things like The Rig, which is a made-for-TV film, the first of its kind in the Anglophone Caribbean, that was written and directed by Derek Walcott and produced by Banyan, and it sits in the archive. So you can see that most of the programs that sit in the archive, you can see them on Gael. But people are now in a place of viewing on demand. They want to know that, okay, 6 o'clock this evening, I'm going to see what's happening in the archive or whatever it is. And that is the task for Mia Motley and the people of Barbados and the government of Barbados to create the platform. And I think people should not be able to see it for free. I think if it's $5 or $2 or something we pay every time we go there so we can experience that body of work, because it is an incredible body of work.
Okay, so let me ask this question. If somebody is interested in researching materials that are in the archives, are the archives organized in a way to facilitate that kind of research where it is cataloged, categorized in certain themes and so on, so you can direct somebody who might be interested in a particular genre of art to go to the collection, and that research can be made easier for them?
It absolutely is. If you put in the name Shabaka Kambon in that Gael archive and search it, everywhere Shabaka ever appeared in a Banyan production, or every time a reference was made to Shabaka's name, will pop up. And you could go and see him when he was a little boy, when he was a teenager, when he was a big man, when he had hair, now he don't have hair, all these things. You put in David Rudder's name, you put in any person who is in that archive, you pop in their name, and every instance will pop up. If you put in Marshall Montano, you'll see him at 9 years old, home in the mother house, putting on his clothes, getting ready to go to school. You'll see him as a little boy in the marsh grass singing Too Young to Soca. You will see him in Soca Monarch winning it. You will see it. You'll see it all. Once Banyan shut it.
Okay, Banyan has been associated with Gael, of course, for a number of years. Where exactly is Gael now in terms of, national television?
Doc, before Errol answers that question, let me just say it's 9 o'clock. So we want to say good night to our listeners on 91.1.
No, 91.1 is not on live tonight, Shabaka.
Okay. So we just have our audience on social media. Yeah. All right. So for our audience, we're going to continue. We have a Gael over time. Here we are with our special. Go ahead, Dr. Fergus. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, I'm asking this question and also from an ESC perspective where, we intend to have a new relationship with Gael. Where's Gael in terms of that spectrum of television in Trinidad and the Caribbean as a television channel?
So Gael has moved from being Gael the channel to Gael the Caribbean. We are available on connected cable in every Caribbean territory except Cuba and Bonaire. We are in Dr. Arrindell, where are you? In St. Martin, we are in St. Martin. We're in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're in the Bahamas. We're in the Turks and Caicos. We're in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're on every landmass in the Caribbean that has a flow cable, which is every landmass. We are available on connected cable there. So it will be good for me and Motley to talk to Gael about making the archive available to Caribbean people. Maybe we schedule a time where we go into visit the Banyan archive. But this is not at all to discount the Gael archive, which is the archive we've been building from 2003 to date, which is a 22-year-old archive, which is in HD for the most part, which is very different to the quality you would find in the Banyan archive. And just as important, but the Banyan archive is the root of who we've been since video was introduced into the world. Mm-hmm. A lot of television stations in the region, Christopher Led would have taught them television production through UNESCO and different organizations in the early days. So Where's Gael? We are a national station in Trinidad and Tobago still. We are a Caribbean station. And it is, I don't want to say sad or unfortunate that this program hasn't been on Gael from the time it has started, because these are the things that Gael lives to do. You know, and I'm glad we were invited tonight and that we pulled the signal. But every one of your shows coming up and all that you have archived, they have a place on Gael.
Oh, lovely. Well, you know, we got a chance.
Yeah, we're glad to hear that.
And of course, you know, we promised to bring it on Indaba. But let's bring everybody together now. And I think we're going to use the word that Abeo introduced into the conversation tonight, the word disruptive. And let's start there, because that, again, for the purpose of the younger listeners, the millennials and so on, disruptive could be a negative word. But help us, everybody, to contextualize what it means to refer to the culture that we're producing, the culture that we want to see thrive and live, as disruptive. Why should we use that terminology, you know, in the post-independence period? Somebody help me start. Perhaps we could start with Dr. Rhoda, and we move on from there.
Yeah, mine, I don't know how brief it is, but when I hear disruptive, you know, for me, that's a positive thing, because like you guys earlier said, I live in a colonized space. I keep reminding people that every day. I live in a colonial space of two European states, French and Dutch, which means everything about me is disruptive. Everything about what we do is about trying to disrupt, right? We want to decolonize just about everything because we want it to be authentic to the Caribbean. So when I hear you say, and this is every time I hear it, and I don't blame you, because for most of you guys who live in a space that's no longer physically, politically colonized, you speak of post-colonial. I don't live in a post-colonial world. I live in a very colonial world. So there's no post-colonial for me. So every time, that's one of the disruptions I aim to bring, that I know we are family. I teach Caribbean studies, had an awesome discussion with my students here at Howard this morning. But I also remind us that we're not a monolith. We are a family of people of different states, but we have different. So sometimes I think the notion of Caribbeanness gets defined in isolated terms, right? So you have the so-called linguistic zones, which I disagree with, but anyway, that's another conversation. But you have one notion of Caribbean that it's post-colonial, that we're this. No, we're not. A lot of us are still very colonized. And a lot of us are saying, remember that in your conversation, in our conversation when we are talking.
Yeah, but let me just clarify that when we use this term, we use it in a very limited way. First of all, we understand that just about everything that we take pride in, we've had to liberate.
Yes.
Because colonialism defined everything about us, down to every last detail, as inferior, as ungodly, and any other negative adjective.
But they use it here too, and they use the term here with post as if to try to convince us that we are no longer a colony and we should love the condition that we're in and would not want to disrupt it. So I keep insisting that we
you on this question, but the thing about it is that we are at a stage now where and it's particularly us now who you're critiquing, and I think rightfully so. We don't, because I guess we've used the term so much, we don't keep seeking for the things around us. We've lost sight of some of the things that we still have to liberate. And so we find ourselves hanging on to you know, vestiges of our racist colonial past as if it is our heritage in all kinds of strange ways. But let me bring Abby in, because I'm not the guest tonight. Abby, come in on this question here before we get Errol.
Hi, might be my last question before I have to run away. I was supposed to run already, but I needed to hear Uncle Errol. I couldn't leave and not hear Uncle Errol. It actually, in my work, I tend to swap out colonial the same way I swap out feminist for womanist, for ongoing coloniality. Because even though we have experienced the time stamp that is independence, as you say, the colonial project is still very much ongoing. We're still in a space of ongoing coloniality. We just put we just put armed police officers in our schools. If that is not ongoing coloniality, I don't know what is. If that is not the definition of it, I don't know what is. So for me, and that's where disruption comes in. Disruption in terms of especially if you're using the lens of the arts, if you're using the lens of our intangible heritage, it's about creating work that actively tries to stymie, puts a light, sheds a light on, etc., the ongoing coloniality in the space. Sometimes it's as simple as Black joy. Black joy is Black joy, Black love. I mean, we sometimes think of disruption as being the burning tires and the protests in the streets, which are very important. But sometimes it's in the way we choose to live our life. It's in the way we choose to do our work that is the actual disruption. Jamet is disruption by its very nature. The term millennial geometry is disruption by its very nature in terms of how I decide to navigate our daily ongoing systems and those systems that are direct colonial legacy in a way that defies respectability. It's deciding to be a creative academic and learning the rules of academia, I suppose, and scholarly, I suppose, exploits, and then deciding to break every single one of them. Much to my advice, Dr. Burks.
All right. Dr. Fergus is one of them supervisors, you know, Abeo. I'm not sure he's so happy to hear what you have to say on this subject. But I get
no, Shabaka, I agree. In fact, only recently, you know, in looking at the question of neocolonialism, I agree 100% with Abeo that neocolonialism doesn't really describe the condition of that we are in and confront all the time, but rather ongoing colonialism, because neo suggests, you know, rebirth, whereas what we really have to confront is continuity, right? Continuity might be different expression, might be more aspects, more intense or less intense, but continuity. So yes, I fully agree with her in reconceptualizing all of these inherited concepts, all of them. We have to decolonize decolonization itself, you see, in order to come to terms with our realities. So I fully agree with her. I like that kind of revolutionary thinking.
There you go. There we have it. The night on Indaba. Well, Brother Errol, it's just for you to endorse all this geometry going on tonight.
Well, you know, well, geometry is the foundation of who we are. You know? You can't talk disruptor and then talk jamet. Calypso is disruption. We have had disruption. The steel pan is disruption. We've been disrupting and disrupting and disrupting all along. It's not even part of the struggle. It is the lifestyle of so many Caribbean artists. We disrupt. That's what we do, and we hope that there's some benefit coming out of it. But we don't even intellectualize it enough. We just instinctively disrupt because that's the only way we get something. It's the only way we got jobs in this country after the trying to make a revolution of 1970 through the disruption. Is the only way the water rates thing was dealt with back in the day is through disruption. Is the only way oil field workers was able to get a fair wage was through disruption. And it was not only the march and the fire and so on, it was the meetings and the reading and sharing of information and all the kind of thing that came to an head with the physical disruption. But it is disruption. It's all of Black Stalin's work. It's all of Valentino's work. It's all of Duke's work. All of these people, they disrupt, and that's what we do. Panorama is a disruption.
Exactly. Let me just add this note from a historical perspective, because as a historian, you know, the perspective of that disruptive culture is what we call subaltern, right? So we talk about subaltern historiography, but it is the same disruption. So we may use different terminologies, but we actually we are grounded in the same realities, the same existential realities. We are grounded in them, and so we agree basically on that principle. So the Jametism that Abeo introduced is essential to the Caribbean experience of who we are, what made us into what we are. You know, we may have different terminologies, as I said, you know, so that history, a history of subaltern struggle is still part of our struggle because we are still confronting racism, white supremacism, whether it is in the form of Jim Crowism, which probably stepped aside a little, but as we know, it has returned full-fledged now under the new regime and so on. So these things keep stepping aside. You know, it's like it's like a Muhammad Ali dance. You know, you step aside a little, avoid the blow for maybe a couple of years, and then back, you bounce back again with the same kind of fervor of racism. You wonder, where was it? Where was it hiding all the time? You know, so we keep confronting the same things over and over and over. So it's really risky to declare victory against these forces of oppression. You know, it's a risky thing. I know, Shabaka, my brother, we declare victory every now and then, but even after we declare victory, we realize the victory is transient. Right, and the struggle continues, which underscores that point we're making, that our experience is one of constant struggle. You know, Jametism, disruption.
I just thought of a great historical example of geometry. I'm going to do an interview tomorrow morning on the naming of that carriageway from Queen's Hall to Mova Junction, Lady Young, after Lady Young. And I was thinking of what the workers in Trinidad and Tobago did when her husband Herbert Young was coming into the country in 1968. We knew that he was coming from Rhodesia, and he had become popular there for breaking up strikes breaking the strikes of the African workers who were trying to get a just wage in that apartheid-ridden country, and so because of what was happening with Butler and Cipriani here, they decided to send him here to share the expertise, to use the expertise he had gained in Rhodesia on the Trinidadian workers. And of course, they did their research, and when he arrived, they carried signs saying, "Welcome, Hitler Young." You know, and so we had that consciousness to disrupt, you know, and it really is a central part of our history. Of course, you know, after generations of miseducation, some of us have arrived at a point where we think it's okay to have that road or any road named after his wife, Lady Young, who, of course, said before she left Trinidad that even the whites here were inferior because they had spent too much time around the Indians and the Africans, and had imbibed this climate, and as a consequence, they weren't on par with the whites from Europe. So she was an absolute racist, and of course, we have to share this information and this knowledge with our people so they can make the right decisions about if they want to continue to honor and celebrate the names of these people in our public spaces across the country. It's nice.
Okay, I would like us, before we wrap up, I would want to have a view from each of our guests, you know, with respect to what I introduced at the beginning. The lines of continuity and relevance as we move through these episodes of cultural expressions, you know, from the Harlem Renaissance. We can go before, even during slavery, there were ways in which Africans organized for creative expressions. We have the cabildos of Cuba, for example. Dia del Rey was one of those celebrations in Trinidad. These events were celebrated under a system called the regiments and so on, where in defiance, and there the Jamatism, finds expression in defiance, open defiance of the plantation regime. People came out still to express themselves culturally and so on. So, but then we have one of the really big explosions of creativity in terms of the arts in the Harlem Renaissance. We have, as I said, the festivals of the 1960s and 70s, the Writers and Artists Convention, an attempt to bring things back together again. Then CARIFESTA, then FESTAC. CARIFESTA continues into what it has evolved in today. What is the relevance of all of this together for the global African community? What does it tell us about this Jamatism, this disruptivity that is essential to our being as a global Africa? Because even in the continent, they face similar oppressive regimes, genocide, even enslavement, and so on. So it's a common experience. So how do these expressions link and find some kind of commonality across the global diaspora?
Well, I want to say, Doc, that I see it in Carnival. Carnival is a festac. It is a CARIFESTA. Carnival, and it has replicated itself throughout the region, throughout the first world, as we call it. I remember being in New Jersey, and there was this massive parade for breast cancer awareness, and everybody coming along, marching in the pink and so on. And then along came the Caribbean people, disrupting. Pan, iron section, everything, costumes is not just enough for the Caribbean people, because we always have to find an artistic expression in everything we do. We have to find it. And I think that Carnival is one of the ways, because the biggest African community outside of the continent is in Brazil. There's a big carnival there. We have to, and I look around, I see how it's connected with respect to the arts through carnivals.
Yes. Dr. Arrindell.
Well, I was gonna say, I wasn't gonna say carnival, but I was gonna say, I think organically, authentically, it's there, right? What's the sister Abeo was saying earlier, like when you look at what happened at CARIFESTA, like most of us in the Caribbean can go to like any space, and eventually you'll pick up the rhythm and you'll figure it out, whether it's Joncanu in Bahamas, or when the Venezuela group was there, that I could dance it because we can relate it. We know it. It may not be the pattern that we're using at the time, but when you string the different things together in the dance, you see we're dancing the same dance. And I think that's there organically. So what's the relevance of it? I think it's, number one, it's creative expression, but also it's a reminder of who we are and how connected we are. And I think sometimes in our day-to-day experiences that we're having in all these isolated spaces, we tend to forget that. Yes, we know we're family. Yes, we know that we're part of a diaspora, but sometimes we forget how connected we are and how much alike a lot of the things are. So when you see the masqueraders, when you see some of these other things like the jab in Grenada and stuff, you look like, we don't do it that way, but I recognize elements of it from maybe a different place, etc., in a different time. And then I see it like as a continuum. You can have on one end of the continuum something that totally looks foreign to you, but as you go through the whole Caribbean and you go to the diaspora, you go to the African continent, etc., you see it was like, wow, that exactly. Yeah. So when I hear Gramax International, this old time songs from Gramax from Dominica and St. Lucia, and then you hear it sung by a Claudius Philip in Aruba, and it's the exact same song, just the words are different, the beat is a little off, but you recognize that, and you recognize that in Trinidad. But you go to Ghana and you see exactly the same thing, and you go like, I know that song, I know that beat, and we know it instinctively, we know it organically. And I think these festivals help to remind us of that.
That's a great
to see us as awesomely beautiful people.
Yes, I think that's a great place for us to close now. And I think
Yeah, let's bring in Abeo. Let's bring in Abeo, Shabaka, and take a look at any question. Shabaka, any questions from the audience? Please check out and let's hear from Abeo in the same perspective.
After this, but I think just to tie up, Dr. Burke has this great thing that she talks about the roots and roots. So the roots ROUTES and the roots ROOTS. And CARIFESTA's theme, the Caribbean roots, global excellence. And for me, it's simply two things. And it encompasses everything you all said. I feel like spaces like CARIFESTA, which is a celebration of the carnivalesque in a lot of ways, is about ancestral memory. It's about honoring ancestral memory. And I know there are times people don't feel uncomfortable talking about the spiritual that is happening inside of it, but it is ancestral memory, and it is an opportunity for us to divest our pain that is part of the ancestral memory. The things that are baked into our DNA and in our bodies because of the things our ancestors would have endured. This is our opportunity to celebrate as a collective. So for me, spaces like Carnival and CARIFESTA and all of the other collective festivals is about ancestral memory, as well as it is truly an underlining of just how very bad and sickening and blessed we are as a people, because we're very bad. And everybody around the world, in terms of their cultural forms and their cultural expression, borrows shamelessly from us and gives us no credit. Borrows shamelessly from us as a diaspora and gives us no credit. So when we get to come together, see each other and celebrate each other, it reminds us just how amazing it is to live in this body and live in this space despite all we have endured. And that's what. Okay, great.
Thank you, Abeo. Good night to you and your family. And Brother Errol, your closing remarks?
Just very, very grateful to be here and wanting to see, it may sound like a deviation from what we're talking about, but Gal Caribbean is in a very, very small percentage of Black-owned media on the planet. And we need to get your content. Wherever you are listening to this, we need to get your content so that we can keep a sense of ourselves on the air at all time. Black-owned media is a rarity in this world.
Okay, so let's make that call for people to contribute or engage Gael Media as they produce and attempt to document the past and the future of this space. Thank you, Brother Errol. Thank you, Dr. Rhoda. Thank you, Sister Abeo, and Dr. Fergus.
Yes, I agree. I just want to say that yes, with Errol's statement there, that Black media was born as an endangered species, actually. It still exists as an endangered species. So it's up to us to grow it. Nobody will do it for us. It's for us to support our own and to help it to grow. And we really look forward, Fabien, to a new relationship between Indaba and Gael. We need to see how that would work out. So we really appreciate that offer from you, that suggestion. And we definitely would see greater things happening to Indaba as we go forward. So yes,
can I also say that at one aspect, I'm going to put our technical guys in touch so that we can also benefit from the privilege of the platform and see how much we can link up. Thanks.
I put a link in the chat so you could check it out. We're there 24/7.
Excellent. And Dr. Rhoda, we gotta be in touch about this here issue in St. Martin. We'll talk privately. Take care. Lots of love to everybody. And of course, we thank our listeners for tuning in and invite them to join us again next week, Wednesday, for another edition of Indaba. Same time, same place. The voice of the people, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee. Good night.
Good night.